Giving back to those that have served our country. An area organization partners with local businesses to help veterans find purpose in life outside of the military with a veteran hiring event.
Hosted at Memorial Hall in Rockford, local veterans were invited to walk in and speak with employers and do practice interviews. Organizers say this event lets vets show what they have to offer and the structure and discipline that comes from the military. If the practice interview went well, companies could help the veteran continue through the hiring process and possibly land a job.
We have a lot of veterans come in, they're prepared, we've prepared them, they have their resumes, and they're going around to each table, even if they may not have a job open today, because they want to put that face to that resume and not just kind of have it go in the trash.